All right, folks, welcome to another episode of Grown Up Product, the podcast for founders, CEOs, and operators who are curious about how to really build successful product orgs in a post-product market fit environment. Today, we have a really exciting guest. Richard Abi-Chahla is a fractional CPO all the way from Beirut, Lebanon. Always fun to have guests from other locations. Richard, welcome. I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself with our audience.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me. So I'm a product manager. I have 18 years of experience. I started my own agency, Purple Brains, in 2011, and we had two tracks. The first one is to create our own products, which was our main passion. And the second part is to help other people create their products, either startups or SMBs or enterprises. And so far we've been having a diversity of products. We have worked across more than 50 products across 15 different industries. And we make sure to help people get the maximum chance of success with the minimum use of risk and resources. Let's say it's a startup that is in agriculture, an AgTech startup. Mm-hmm. Me as a product manager, I would respect the knowledge they have in AgTech and the knowledge they have for the AgTech users, but I always rely on research to take a decision to move forward to something, especially if that something is really critical. If we are relying on our gut feelings and it is an ag-related topic, for example, I would go with their instinct. If it's a product-related, how we're going to price it, what's the experience going to be, what kind of technology we're going to use, I try to stand my ground because you brought me because you're lacking the product and technology. I'm not arguing with the ag information. And also the problem is that they always tend to build more because a founder or a project manager, they want to see the full-fledged solution the way they see it in their head. But some of them don't understand that this is the end goal. And we might not reach that end goal because after we build the MVP and we start validating, we need to listen what the user wants. We cannot go into the direction you want specifically. If the user feedback takes us somewhere else, you might end up with a totally different product. And this is critical for their success. For me, as a fractional person, I would love if every product I work on is a major success. But sometimes you have to go with whatever they want. And by the way, there's a lot of times that I stop working on a project because I tell them I am not convinced with the approach that you are going with.
I will say for my own part, I've worked for several companies, at least. I won't throw anybody under the bus, but where the culture has certainly been much more argumentative than average, I guess, in the U.S. And I think in my personal experience, the ability to kind of inject a testing framework, right? If you may be 100% correct with that, but let's at least invest a little bit of resources in testing alternatives and make sure that we get some proof, some data to reinforce that. And so I kind of think of that as the Trojan horse of shortcutting those argumentation cycles, right? If I can just get you to agree to any test at all, then that kind of opens the door to how do we start to bring other perspectives, data, really reliable sources to the table to help, Is that something that you've also seen success with, or I'm curious if you have other approaches that have worked for you?
I've seen success in this. This is like whenever I make my case that this is not validated and we will end up paying that much money and we might throw them away. Some leaders or some founders or project managers, they end up listening. But whenever you are dealing with the C-level, and the C-level of a small to medium startup, like 50, 100 people, they start going to conferences and speaking to people about their products, and they start listening interesting feedback from other C-level players in other companies. They start giving them ideas. They might not be the users, or they might have a different problem that they are solving than the one we are solving. And they come back super excited. Like if I put myself in their shoes, they have been in a conference, let's say on Thursday, they heard those opinions Thursday, Friday. They spent the weekend thinking about them. They came back to our weekly meeting on Monday or Tuesday, and they have been brewing that for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And at the beginning, 4 or 5 years back, they give me the big idea for them, and for me, I see clearly that this is something we're not going to do. Like, this is clearly not suitable for that kind of persona that we're building for. It is solving a different problem. It will cost us a lot. So I took two approaches. First one is I start probing with them, asking them, reminding them what's the short-term goal that we're working for, and what's our current progress on that short-term goal, and when is the deadline of that goal. And I give them the choice. I tell them, from now until then, we have a capacity of, let's say, 80 story points or 100 story points. My estimation of the thing you want to build, of course, I need to refer with the team, but my estimation is that it's 20 story points. Look at the backlog and tell me what features you want to remove, and how do you convince me that this one is more important than this one?
Yep.
Whenever you quantify it for them that we have limited resources, we need to build by that time, you either push the deadline, and the deadline is entangled with other commitments that we have made with other companies, with partners, with our investors, whatsoever. Whenever you put it that way, they start making sense of what they are asking for. Sometimes they say, yes, I want you to remove this and that, and they give a valid reason, and then I say, then you're right. Let's do this instead. Some other time, they are just like in front of the team, you told them that this is not suitable or this is not what we need to build. They start pushing back. Then my way to get me out of it and to get them out of it, because of course this is a conversation they also want to end. They are a C-level person and they have a fractional person in front of them that's telling them your big idea that you came with is not suitable in front of the whole team. So I tell them, all right, let's write this down in details into the backlog and let's decide later on its priority. So my approach is to give it a low priority. If you can convince me on increasing the priority, then it will take precedence over something that has lower priority. And this has been, so my previous boss, Simone, used to laugh about it, saying, this is your very diplomatic way of telling me we're never going to do that. But actually, this is not that I'm never going to do that. It's that now in the next 3, 4, 5 months, this is not my priority. You're shifting my priority away. We can do this as another milestone after we have researched it enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you're hitting on, honestly, one of the more important part, kind of soft skills, I would call it, as a PM, certainly as a PM leader, right? Of you can't really ever say fully no to almost anything, right? Because I think that really, at the end of the day, also undercuts your own authority, right? If you can look at somebody else's idea and say, that's absolutely not correct, we're never doing that, delete it, you're kind of opening the door for them to be able to do that to you too, in some cases, right? So I think, keeping that healthy skepticism and saying, I think I'm right, but we should always be willing to test this. We should always be willing to revisit our assumptions and reprioritize, if circumstances change. I think, honestly, in my estimation, that increases your authority, right, and your believability when you do that, and show that you are truly willing to, to follow through on it too. Weaving together a couple of the things you were just talking about, I mean, it's definitely resonating strongly with me, right? Of on one hand, the CEO, founder, leader of the company, I think even if they are outwardly the most, resistant to change person, they are, to your point, still looking for inspiration and insight from somewhere that often will come from their peers or, I don't know, people on Twitter or whatever. But it is often really frustrating, I think, as the person who's hired to come in and help enact that change, that you find yourself being the person who's, in some cases being stonewalled or listened to the least. And what I've actually experienced, I don't know if this has been your experience as well, but my corporate career, when I was hired into those roles full time, I felt like I was listened to even less than, I am as a fractional CPO, right? I've actually had a very positive experience there of coming in and feeling like, the messages, the strategies, the themes that I've been trying to communicate for decades now, right, are actually listened to, ironically, more when I'm only a part-time employee versus when I'm full time and often have stock and, fully invested in the success of that company in a, even deeper way. So finding ways to become the person that's actually listened to, I think is part of the challenge, right? For us as both fractionals and just as leaders in general. But, to your second point as well, right? The situation that a lot of employees find themselves in at these companies is they've had these ideas for years. They haven't been listened to. They're not being incentivized to even speak up anymore. They are, just kind of grinding it out 8 hours a day because they're like, well, I know how to improve this, but nobody's listening, right? And what I've found is kind of blending those two thoughts together. A lot of the time, when I'm coming into a new engagement, really all I have to do on some fundamental level is listen for a month or two, go on a listening tour, compile all the different ideas that I'm hearing from the various employees, and then just, put our PM hat on and start to, filter out the ones that are good from the ones that are bad, and, just bring those to the surface, right? And they just get listened to differently because you're a new outside voice, even if it's the same thing that somebody's been saying for literally 5 years. But it helps to build credibility, I think, not only with the CEO, right? Because you're saying, I listen truly to your employees. Here's what I'm hearing. I have a deep understanding of the problems and likely solutions. So, you look good really quickly, but then you can also go back to those people and say, hey, I listened. And now you can come to me with all your other ideas. So I think that dynamic is really, beneficial, right, for these companies. But then you take a step back and you're like, why did I need to be part of this, right? Like, these ideas existed before I came, that you really just needed somebody to come in and unlock them. So I look at that as kind of one of the, the kind of foundational mistakes, that a lot of companies are making. Obviously, that we as fractionals can help unlock in a really powerful and rapid way. But I'm curious on your end, that being kind of one aspect of thematic problem or challenge that you see in a lot of companies. Are there any others that you find yourself thematically encountering frequently at your various clients?
I notice when I work to enterprises or startups that are trying to behave like large enterprises with all this levels, organization, very rigid workflows. I noticed that sometimes the solution is so simple, but for them it is something they would have never thought of. And for a normal startup, small startup, it's something like a no-brainer. One example, I was working for a large enterprise. I'll try to tell this without calling names. And it was a very proud enterprise. Very, very proud enterprise. And whatever they do, they want to put their logo, their stamp, their branding everywhere. They want to shout the name of the company that we've done that. Even if this is not their core service or their core offering. And they had a mission to build technology that will provide them data for them to provide a better product, a better physical product for the one they are offering. And for me, what's the end goal? The end goal is to sell your product. The end goal is to develop your product. So the technology is not your end goal. So instead of you building one more competing solution in the market and trying to compete with the existing players that have been there before you 20 years probably, and to get that amount of data, why don't you API your technology through their tools and be able to expand very fast and be able to get all their data and to enable them to serve their customers better. And you're still getting the data. And if you remove your logo, you will face less resistance from the users to use you because they don't know that the data they are putting here, it will end up building their product. Because that kind of consumer always feared that there's a conspiracy theory on them, and people are taking their data to make things more expensive for them the next year or so. So removing their logo played a lot for them, like it was on their behalf. And for them, this was a no-brainer. And I really had to tooth and nail and to speak to their managers and to do those big pitches, convincing them that that's your product. The technology is not your product. It's the means that you need to develop a better product. So just let go of your logos and branding and having your own solution there, because based on previous experiences, look what you've done here and it didn't work out. Look where you're still trying to push this kind of solution here and it's not getting all the information you need. While in that case, you are able to get 100 times more data with 10 times less budget, and you'll be able to expand. It's much more scalable. And whenever this worked out, for them, it was an aha moment. Like it changed their mentality inside the enterprise, and they started adopting that for different purposes after I ended my project and my engagement. So it's often that your mindset working, and I come from a startup background mainly, and I grew to be an enterprise player. So coming from a startup background where you put multiple hats, where you try to make means and in whatever way possible, makes you more of a jack of all trade, being able to combine from different industries the solutions. Like I remember this solution, we applied it in health tech. Probably it would work in legal tech as well if we try to change this, if we try to do that. Engineers work a little bit like lawyers, so let's try to apply that solution for them. And this have helped me a lot. I worked across 15 different industries, from health tech to ag tech to legal tech to CRMs, enterprise solutions, FMCG. I've been everywhere. And getting this cross experience across sectors helped me a lot to be able to innovate. And for me, it comes as a no-brainer. Like for me, I just see it in front of me, while for them, it is really a revealing moment for them, because they have been working in this same sector and this same enterprise for a certain number of years. They are set in their ways.
Yeah.
They only refer to the previous solutions that they have seen in that same sector or organization.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I certainly your breadth of experience and the benefit that you are saying you've derived from that in terms of coming up with innovative insights and solutions. That certainly resonates with me. I don't know that I've worked in quite as many different industries as it sounds like you have, but I've always intentionally been a generalist myself as well, and I'm constantly drawing those connections that you referenced, right? Between, this worked in e-com, this should also work in fintech, and, therefore it should also work here and there, right? I think that is really a very strong tool, right, in any PM's quiver. I'd love to go a little deeper, though, right? I think I have my own, lens on why this is the case, but, from your experience and your opinion, what holds companies back from thinking more innovatively, or being more open to alternative solutions, right? I hear we've done this the same way, we've been in the same industry for decades, so we're just going to kind of default to the thing that we're comfortable with, and I think that is one aspect of it. But a lot of these companies also hire McKinsey, Bain, whatever, to come in with these massively expensive innovation packages, right, which don't really seem to move the needle in any tangible way often, right? So there's a gap, right? Of they're spending millions of dollars to say we want to innovate, and then it doesn't happen, right? Like what's holding them back in your estimation?
I think the corporate world has been working in a certain way for the past probably 50 something years, and they used to go for the big consulting firms for advice, but now they are using them as scapegoats, the people to blame whenever things don't work out. And if you look at it, the CEOs of those organizations blame the consultant, and the consultant blames the CEOs, saying like, we gave you the right advice, you did not implement it well. And the CEOs say, we took your advice, it didn't work out. And I guess the amount of money that has been spent, and this is my personal opinion, the amount of money that has been spent and thrown away in the tech sector over the past 15 or 20 years pushed that sector to develop those new, like UX research, product thinking, the lean methodologies, the agile way of building stuff. It pushed the thinking forward. And now, like especially in the COVID time, a lot of the organizations needed to do this evolvement in their processes. So they started adopting the product mentality, the startup mentality. They started hiring entrepreneurs in residence inside their company to give them those insights. And this is changing. I'm seeing a lot of organizations are coming to me asking me to do some task for them, while a few years back they used to go to McKinsey, Bain, and they used to ask them for that advice. And I think that the consulting firms are catching up to that, because when I was at the Web Summit last year in Lisbon, I met a lot of consulting firms that come on board and they are pitching, that came to the event and they were pitching the different startups that we will help you innovate. And I was, okay, we are your startup consultants. And they were targeting Series A and Series Bs. So I was having coffee with one of those and I was asking her, like, okay, if I have a Series B startup and I went to you, what are the resources that will be working on my project? Are they ex-founders? Are they people who got their hands dirty? No, we are expert in innovation. Okay, you're expert in innovation. Cool. But have you know theories? Theories in practical, they don't work. Did you have your hands-on experience in a certain number of startups and you know what worked, what didn't work? And even more, were you founders in some of those startups, or were you very early employees? Like your neck was on the line. If this does not work, you will lose your job. Or you were always in the consultant seat or in a large organization seat where they would throw a couple of million on a project. If it doesn't work out, we go to the next project. They said, no need. We don't get our hands on. We just give them the theory and they have to apply it. So they are catching on, but still for the same perspective where they cannot be blamed for anything. And this is really frustrating for organizations. And this is why they are seeking fractional people like us. We are individual contributors. We give our opinion. We help them implement it. If it doesn't work out, we help them pivot and we test again until things work out. Otherwise, we both failed. It's not that they failed, we did not.
Yep. I think you're hitting precisely on, honestly, one of the reasons that I wanted to start this podcast and have these conversations, which is, when you talk to, I don't want to pick on consultants, purely in this conversation, but, just to continue that theme at least, right? When you talk to a lot of these consulting companies, they are trying to package innovation into something that sounds certain, right? And I can say, in my personal experience, one of my enterprise clients, I joined directly after a consulting engagement from, one of the big consulting companies. And I got to look at some of the materials that they had handed off. And it was absolute certainty on, 3 or 4 slides. You need to do this, this, and this. But the this, and this was like, you need to use AI in your tool. Okay, that's so unhelpful. How, right? Not to mention that's just, kind of boilerplate advice that you could get from anybody off the street these days, probably, right? So it looked just absolutely certain. Like we've done all this research. We know exactly what you should do. Zero implementation behind it. And really at the end of the day, because of that, zero value, right? But I think, the companies have to maybe go through that experience a couple of times to realize that certainty is not actually valuable in this context, right? Like, I think what you're referring to is the reality, right, of building good products, right? It is messy. I can come in with a thesis, a hypothesis, but I have to be ready to be wrong. I have to be ready to be wrong in a spectacular way, potentially, right? As I, hear things from users and customers that may not be anything I've ever heard before or expected to hear, right? And for me to tell anybody, like founder, CEO, that that's not going to happen. I know exactly what I'm talking about, and we've done this for 50 other companies. Like it's ignoring how messy the process really is fundamentally. And I think much better to embrace that and say, we're going to learn things that we don't know. And therefore we need a testing approach. We need to be humble about our beliefs, right? And proceed accordingly. But it's just very hard, I think, for the bigger the company, even for that message to resonate, because they do, broadly speaking, operate on certainty and predictability, and anything that is unknown is bad and must be either squashed or ignored.
The biggest asset of a product manager is to be able to take decisions with very few certainties or very few data that he has in front of him, and to be able to have the courage to take this decision because it might threaten his position. Like, it's not easy for people to say, I was wrong. We need to be comfortable saying, I'm taking this decision. I don't have enough data. Based on my previous experience, based on my gut feeling, and based on what I'm seeing in front of me and the few data that we have, this is the best approach. And we need to be lenient enough to be at any point able to say, all right, stop. I was wrong. Let's pivot a little bit. Let's change course a little bit and test that. I cannot tell you the amount of time that I gathered the team and I said, guys, we need to stop whatever we're doing because we didn't have this knowledge that we now have. And if we continue on that course, we will fail. There's a wall at the end. We need to shift course into doing that. And what makes that affordable to do is if whenever you don't have enough data, you build the minimum possible. You don't build a lot. You build the minimum possible. So the amount you lose is a lot less than the amount you would have lost if you have built the full-fledged thing.
I'm curious. I mean, that I think you're articulating a strategy that has worked well for a lot of successful companies, certainly. The prevailing sentiment in tech in Silicon Valley right now seems to be due to AI and vibe coding. Throw all that out the window. Build as fast as possible, right? Like I can do whatever I want in Lovable and Replit and these tools for $20 a month. So go crazy, build everything, right? Which I think is directly in conflict with what you were just articulating. How do you see that? Is there a middle ground, or
it's not
are those
really
people just wrong? How do you? Yeah,
it's not really in conflict, but like the validation part shifted. Yeah. Instead of doing a lot of UX research and a lot of interviews and a lot of surveys and spending 2-3 months analyzing those, you can do that in 1 week, just get a high level sense. Because, all right, you're not spending a lot of time on developers now and a lot of money on developers, and the development effort is less, but you're still spending time. So if you don't want to build 10 solutions and then learn from them every time, just do a little bit of UX research. You don't do it over the course of 2 to 3 months. Do it over the course of 1 or 2 weeks. And then prototype. We use 3 years back, we used to do 2 to 3 months UX research and get really thorough with that. If we don't have 20, 30 interviews, if we did not have 500 survey replies, we would still be shaky on our assumptions. But now, even if we have 4 or 5 interviews and we are convinced this is our target audience and we have like 50, 100 surveys, we can move. We used to validate the prototype before building it. Now we can just prototype the designs and build them fast using Lovable, Replit, Cursor, whatever, and then put them in front of people. Just don't build the full-fledged solution. Just build whatever you need to understand if you build more. The time you are investing, even if it's costing one person $20 per month and that person's time, it's still cost that you're putting. So if you stay within the range of validating as much as we can with our target audience, instead of doing a lot of UX research, then building a prototype like UX wireframes and so forth, and then showing them to our user and then going and building that, you can skip a lot of parts, but still do them. If you don't want to validate the UX UI, it's fine. Just build that fast because it's much more interactive whenever you build it into a piece of software and put it in front of your users very early on. Just now, you used to be able to do that every month. Now you can do that every week. Do it every week. Give it to them. Let them test it. Let them give you feedback, and then you iterate. Because even in that case, if you've been building for 2 months, if there's something early on that you've done wrong, those 2 months, you'll have to throw them away. It's the same case. It's just that mistakes are cheaper now, but there are still mistakes you have to pay for.
Yep, that's absolutely right. Well, Richard, we're coming up on time here, but I'd love to leave you with one last question. I think you've got a lot of good insights, and certainly advice on some level for founders, CEOs, people, who are actively trying to scale companies with a product lens. If there's one thing you could advise people to do differently or change in order to have a more significant impact, what would that be?
They need to be comfortable. They need always to think from their user's lens. They need to be comfortable taking assumptions and building on them. And they need to be comfortable building slow. Like, be quick to market, but don't build too much. Just don't wait a lot of time until you get feedback. So constantly stay in the loop with your customers to get feedback from them and build slow. And please stop hiring consultants to blame them and resources to blame them. Hire people to really put their hands in your project or product and really push it forward. I'm not trying to market for fractional people, but the amount of risk you're saving whenever you hire a fractional person is tremendous, because you can start right away. Instead of waiting for you to hire or waiting for a consultant to build you a nice presentation, and then based on that you have to hire, you can hire someone for an engagement, a fractional person for an engagement, within days, if not weeks, probably. We start working right away. And then if your project doesn't pick up, we just stop working. And this is where you stop paying. If the project picks up, we can always train someone to take over if you want an employee, if you need a full-time employee. So it's practically reducing your risk as a company owner or as an organization, and increasing your chances of success. And if it doesn't work, we will get blamed. It's not that we'll throw the blame on you and you will throw the blame on us.
Yeah. All right, folks, you heard it here first. Stop hiring consultants, start hiring fractionals. Richard, thank you so much. Richard Abi-Chahla from Purple Brains. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Brian. Bye-bye.